Welcome back to Making It Awkward. I'm your host, Jessica Wilson. All right, before we get started on today's topic of seed oils and whether or not we should be eating them, I've got an update for you all. As of December 1st, 2024, we have a new definition for anti-diet dietitians. They, quote, often use social media to co-opt anti-diet messages and build lucrative followings, sometimes partnering with food makers to promote their products, end quote. Let's imagine a world in which a story was told over and over again until that just became the truth. Not because it was factual, but because there wasn't another version on record. Let's envision a world that uses the experiences of few people to draw conclusions about a large population of people. Oh, wait. We don't have to imagine this world. We've seen it in many iterations over time, and now the Washington Post recently launched its artificial intelligence feature where we can ask anything and the paper will spit us back the answer. Because of the way the Washington Post and its sibling, The Examination, have covered anti-diet dietitians, the first thing I asked the program was, what is an anti-diet dietitian? The first sentence to the answer was, quote, an anti-diet dietitian is a dietitian who promotes the anti-diet movement, which began as an effort to combat weight stigma and an unhealthy obsession with thinness. It then goes on to the rest, implying that, anti-diet dietitians partner with people like PepsiCo and build lucrative followings and probably a lot of money. Cool. It's really going well. This is a simple example of ways that publication can drive narratives. Another example is the way that the New York Times has historically cited anti-trans blogs and activists as experts on trans care and whether trans people exist. And as the New York Times is often the truth on record, what they cover become facts. I'll link to a podcast with a series about the New York Times coverage of trans people in the show notes. And in another development on health policy, I added a post-production note in the last episode about Dr. Oz being tapped to oversee Medicare and Medicaid for all of us. Now, it was shortly after that we got the photo of Trump, Elon, Mike Johnson, Trump Jr., and our man of the moment, RFK Jr., in a private jet eating their favorite McDonald's combo meals. Something that none of us were surprised by after listening to Jeff Hutt tell us that Make America Healthy Again was a great pull on America's heartstrings to just get votes for Trump.
And he actually put his campaign on recess and he endorsed President Trump. There was some confusion in the messaging about where to vote for Mr. Kennedy, where not to, what states to. Yeah. And we, myself and these four other campaign workers, we got together and formed the Make America Healthy Again PAC. And our goal was on the short term, was to encourage Kennedy voters, no matter where they were, to come out and vote for President Trump.
As we could have expected, there has been a steady stream of Make America Healthy Again merch on maha.org or maha.org, as I'll say. But something I simply did not see coming was a naked RFK Jr. in an ad for his celebrity wife's candles. Cheryl Hines made a video for her Maha soy-based candles while her husband showered in the background.
No, you can't take a shower. I'm doing a video. No, you've got to give me a second. I'm doing a video for Hines and Young. Okay, this is, honey.
And this is another example that Maha and this next administration are invested in promoting the fear-mongering about health while they deposit their checks. I'm left wondering what Maha candles smells like and also whether Bobby washes his legs. Bobby brings me to today's topic. Should we be consuming seed oils? According to him, the answer is clear.
Why should people be worried about these kind of products?
Seed oils are one of the most unhealthy ingredients that we have in foods. And the reason they're in the foods is because they're heavily subsidized. They're very, very cheap, but they are associated with all kinds of very, very serious illnesses, including body-wide inflammation.
Right.
Which affects all of our health. It's one of the worst things you can eat, and it's almost impossible to avoid. If you eat any processed food, you're going to be eating seed oil.
And for folks who are just listening to this podcast, Bobby reposted this clip from an interview he did on Fox News onto his X, whatever, Twitter page. And at the end of the interview, fades away and then cuts into merch that says, "Make frying oil tallow again." You can get hats and shirts with a reference to beef tallow. Why wouldn't he be selling something? But even the Washington Post AI tells me that Bobby isn't a reliable source of health information, a question I truly did ask. So let's find out what's happening. When news outlets have been covering seed oils lately, the summary is collapsed into refined seed oils are bad because we eat a lot of them in ultra-processed food. That sentence does not make sense. I'd also heard that seed oils are unhealthy for us because they're refined, but not all of them are. And they're high in omega-6 fatty acids. To see if I can make sense of all of this and to figure out why seed oil scaries were trending, I asked Dr. Selina Wang for a quick chat about oils. Dr. Selina Wang is an associate professor of cooperative extension at the Department of Food Science and Technology, where she is also the department vice chair. Her mission-oriented research focuses on food quality and purity, fruit and vegetable processing, and food sustainability. She also provides extension to industry members about raw material quality, shelf life, chemical changes during processing and storage, and byproducts upcycling. Dr. Wang and I use a few technical terms in this conversation, including omega-3s, omega-6s, and oleic acids, and I'll give a quick rundown here. Omega-3s are an essential fatty acid and broadly discussed as anti-inflammatory in the body. Omega-6s are also an essential fatty acid and broadly discussed as pro-inflammatory. I studied with a professor during grad school who was passionate about essential fatty acids, especially coming out of the 90s and early 2000s fat-free craze. For the context of this conversation, I think it's important to say that we require pro-inflammatory fats for a reason. If a cell wall, or many walls, are broken for one reason or another, we want an inflammatory response that delivers white blood cells to the site of infection or injury to start the healing process and repair. What is likely intuitive is that a balance of pro-inflammatory and anti-inflammatory fatty acids is what we need. A balance that can be harder to achieve when the sources of omega-3 fatty acids are found in highest concentrations in fatty fish. They're also found in ground flax seeds, chia and hemp seeds, walnuts, soybeans, purslane, which is an incredibly common weed, and then depending on the diet of the animal, eggs, meat, and dairy products. And as you've been paying attention, you can imagine that the more expensive animal products like grass-fed beef and bison hunted in the wild are those that are going to be higher in omega-3s. And oleic acid is a monounsaturated fatty acid, which has been heavily studied for its health benefits. And for clarification, oleic acid is neither an omega-3 or an omega-6. My chat with Dr. Wang was in her office at UC Davis, a short walk from the university's food processing plant, where I got to talk to Amy Fletcher about ultra-processed foods. My audio is a bit wonky here, but Dr. Wang's is as smooth as olive oil. Dr. Wang, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited to get into the seed oil hysteria of it all. Can you start by telling us a bit about you?
Sure. I am a food chemist by training, and I started my career studying olive oil in 2010, and I've been studying avocado oil in addition to that, and some other edible oil as well.
Mm-hmm. And how did you start doing other oils? Like, what was the transition from big olive oil into others?
Yeah, no, I love olive oil, but likely we will never have enough olive oil to feed the world. So there has to be other healthy, affordable, and accessible alternatives. So I started working on avocado oil and also some other refined oils to see how we can make them healthier as well.
Nice. How can we make them healthier?
Well, there is for sunflower oil or safflower oil, for example, they are high oleic versions of those, which means they basically have similar profile as olive oil or avocado oil because oleic acid is a monounsaturated fat that is the most abundant fat in olive oil.
Okay.
It's oleic, right? That's where the name comes from. And that's a good fat, right? So in short, that's a good fat. And high oleic sunflower oil or safflower oil have much higher concentration of this fatty acid compared to their counterpart. Okay. So the non-oleic version. So that's one way to make these oils healthier. Another way is during the refining, some processing chemical contaminants can occur under high heat. So these compounds have known to potentially have some toxic effects on the body if at high concentrations. So part of it is to understand which part of processing. Often it comes from the high temperature of deodorization. So if we can decrease the temperature of deodorization a little bit, that can mitigate the occurrence of these compounds.
Got it. And does that only happen in the seed oils? Do we not have to worry about that in olive oil and avocado oil?
For these compounds specifically, they occurred during refining. So it's really only a concern for refined oil. So for extra virgin olive oil or extra virgin avocado oil, that is not a concern. That's not to say there's no environmental contaminants in these products.
Okay. So can you tell me what you think about the seed oil hysteria that has been going on lately?
Yeah, so a caveat is I'm not a seed oil expert. I would say that I think being aware of having a good balance of the omega-6 and omega-3 fatty acid in the diet is good because the research has shown, right? The potential information that comes from a really high omega-6 to omega-3 fatty acids. But that's really, I think, the strongest point in the research. And I think it's the seed oil, they're not all made the same, right? Seed oil is kind of a term that lump so many different oils all together, which I don't know if it's the best way to call these products because, like I said, would you consider high oleic sunflower oil and a high oleic safflower oil to be the same category as just regular sunflower oil or regular safflower oil? Because, they have very different fatty acid profile and oxidative stability, right? Because they have very different but because they're essentially different oils. But I think all of them would be under the category of seed oil.
Would sesame oil be a seed oil in this context?
I think depending on who you're talking to.
Right? Because in theory it is a seed.
Yeah. But I have heard that some people consider sesame oil as an exception.
Right.
So that's I've heard both. It's part of the seed oil or not part of seed oil. I think that's the one of the problems with this terminology. I've also talked to people about olive oil and avocado oil processing because when you make olive oil, technically you're using the whole fruit, which has the skin and then the pits and the flesh, right? You're extracting the oil out of the whole fruit. So, if we're going to be really, really strict about this terminology of seed oil, then that's I could argue both ways, just like a lot of things.
Do olive oil and avocado oil have a similar balance of omega-6s and omega-3s?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's the difference. And in context, what are other foods that have high omega-6 to omega-3 ratios?
So I think like soybean oil, red meat.
Yeah.
Right. Those products that I think where the consumption has been increasing in many countries, right? So that seems to be blamed for part of the health crisis that we're having. But I don't think that's all the issue.
Right. And the people now who have a lot of seed oil hysteria are still the ones that are going to eat all of the red meat because, meat and whole foods are going to be great. So the same like higher omega-6 profile in some foods, right, are not going to be the same in others, which is something else that I find fascinating, how it's easy to group like a terrible thing together and say that this is bad, but the other thing that I have that is the same type of, omega-3 profile is different. And you and I were talking earlier about red meat being more expensive.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a double standard in this, and then people convince themselves what is good and what's bad, right? So, I think eating a lot of vegetable is probably cheaper and better for you and better for the environment as well. Also, eating phytonutrients, right? Okay. So, like the antioxidants from fruits and vegetables. Blueberries are known to be a powerhouse of antioxidants. And, if part of the issue is inflammation, right, from these high lipid foods, they cause oxidation, and eating an array of antioxidants, which you can take from natural sources like fruits and vegetables, will help to combat that oxidation and inflammation as well. So sometimes I think we kind of focus a little bit on one area, but it's really the whole spectrum of the foods that we eat, right? Fats is just a part of it.
Yes. Thank you for explaining all of that to me. All of it gets lumped into one category in my brain. So we're talking about omega-6s and omega-3s. Can people hear from you if the goal is to have 0 omega-6s in their diet?
No, that's not a goal.
Yes.
The goal is to have a healthy ratio, and then that healthy ratio is dependent on various factors.
Other parts of your diet, what you have going on. Yes.
Yeah, but I think it's safe to say that in most populations, they can afford to decrease the consumption of omega-6. Okay. And increase the consumption of omega-3. I mean, I have no idea what my consumption of the omega-3, 6 omega-3 ratios are. No idea.
Same. So in the end, do you think this seed oil freak out is anything really different than what you've been studying, what people have been saying forever about how the balance of omega-3s and omega-6s, or is this just like taken off in a new like aspect of food?
I think people want something that is easy to understand, right? Okay. And if you start telling people, oh, there's seed oil, but then there's the high oleic version and then medium oleic version and low oleic version, then it's going to become very confusing, right? But that's the truth, right? But if we taken such a reductionist approach to science and what the research shows, then we end up with this kind of thing where you lump all the different things together so that what we're left with is something that's based on little science, but a lot of misunderstanding and misinformation, right? There is some truth in some of the concerns about seed oil. There's some research to back it up for sure. But there's also a lot that we don't quite understand. And there are a lot of variables. And there's also food security and equity piece to all this as well. So I think it's irresponsible, in fact, to fearmonger and basically tell people that seed oil is really going to hurt you.
Thank you so much for chatting with me.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much to Dr. Wang for this interview. I hope to have her back in the future. Something that seems to be a through line for a lot of conversations about food is whether something can be clearly defined. And here, which seeds make seed oil and how it's refined can be added to that list. When it comes to types of fatty acids and oils that we're eating, it feels similar to the conversation about ultra-processed foods. The ones that have more benefits to our body are those that are most expensive, and there isn't even enough for everyone to eat some of them. It also shows up in the current conversations about single-use plastic food containers, something that we could get into in later episodes if folks are interested. If I were going to approach someone yelling about seed oils, I think I'd say, so you're saying that our food supply should have more variety and that we should have time to cook meals from scratch, and maybe, just maybe, that everyone should be able to afford all foods at any grocery store? Because that's what I'm hearing, and I think we're on the same page. Yelling at people to stop eating seed oils is just another way to get attention for saying nothing new at all. I hope that anytime you're talking to people who are yelling about foods, that you're able to make it awkward. This has been Making It Awkward. I'm Jessica Wilson. And before we go, if the Maha merch wasn't quite your thing, how about some awkward merch? It feels kind of ironic to be advertising my merch after the conversation we've just had, but I'm not proclaiming to lead a political movement. I'm just encouraging us to lean into our awkward, authentic selves. You can lean into your awkwardness with shirts, mugs, even an ornament, but also sweatshirts and hoodies. My dad will be picking up a crew neck sweatshirt and a tote bag. In addition to that merch, the best way to support the show is becoming a Patreon member. Patreon members get behind-the-scene clips of me and my dad, discounts on merch, and podcast updates. My dad is standing by for your Apple Podcast reviews and for your Spotify and YouTube comments. This podcast is edited by the refined Jen Jacobs. It's supported by the Legacy of Sacramento Outboard Services and our Patreon members.